So Allah gave us intelligence here. We don't just apply things, in situations that are not appropriate. So therefore, if we're traveling on a journey, we stop in a place, we can go out and pray with our shoes on, no problem. But where we have masjids where there are carpets and all this kind of thing, we shouldn't go in with our shoes on. And of course it's very obvious here where you have snow and all this, people come tromping into the masjid with their boots on and stuff. Nobody's going to accept that. Even if we accept praying with your shoes on, we're not going to accept that. Right? So we also need to use some hikmah and wisdom in reviving the sunnah, knowing at the same time, as I said, that what they call Wahhabi, and Wahhabi came from the name Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who was a scholar from Arabia who went to Iraq and studied there and came to understand that approach to the deen, which we refer to as the Salafi approach, and did not restrict himself to the Hanbali madhab, which he had studied under and brought back to Arabia. He opposed tawassul, that is praying to the Prophet ﷺ or through the Prophet ﷺ. He opposed it, and he opposed going to the graves of the saints and these type of things. This movement that he began was a revivalist movement to try to bring people back to Islam as it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But he was doing it at a time when the mass of the ummah was astray. So when they saw him calling to these things, he appeared to them to be deviant. And his followers, for example, when they came in and conquered Mecca and Medina in the 20s, and they went into the graveyards of Mecca and Medina, and they tore down all of the gravestones and the huge buildings that they had built over the graves, huge structures, domes and things. If you see pictures of the graveyard, in that time, it looked like a city. Cities, houses built over the dead. So they went in there and they destroyed it all. The Muslim Ummah screamed out at this time, "What? These mad heretics, they're destroying our artifacts." They didn't know, they were ignorant that Prophet ﷺ told Ali to go and level every grave he found more than a palm's width above the ground. Level it. Break all the idols and level the graves. They were ignorant of it. So the movement appeared to be a heretical movement, and that's why they gave them this label, Wahhabi, which came to mean heretic. Ahl Hadith, of course, this term was used by the Hadith scholars. Imam Malik in his time, they were referred to as Ahl Hadith. All the great scholars, Bukhari, these are Ahl Hadith. Obviously it's a good thing. The Ahl Hadith were the people who stuck with the Sunnah, authentication, all these kind of things. But in India, when the Salafi movement arose and they were telling people don't blindly follow the madhab and so on, so we need to get back to the Quran and the Sunnah, they used the term Ahl Hadith now to mean heretic. So you find, for example, just recently some brothers emailed me from Bangalore in India that these leaders from the Hanafi school there, which is the common school of Islamic law, they met in Bangalore and they issued a fatwa that it is not permissible to pray behind the Ahli Hadith people. This is ignorance. It's actually going back to a state where Muslims in the past had split up and wouldn't pray behind each other. Anyway, that basically covers our topic.
What about the ruling on playing chess?
Playing chess is permissible, but where doing so detracts us and stops us from the wajib, we miss our prayers and these kind of things, then it can become haram relative to ourselves. Huh? Later? Okay. Going to sleep on one's stomach, right? Not just say maybe lying down reading or something like that, you're doing it on a limited basis. It is the sleeping, going to sleep on yourself. But if you're in sleep, whilst you're sleeping on your side or on your back, you roll over and you sleep onto your stomach, nothing on you. Of course, this is beyond your control. But just that you deliberately, when you go to sleep, should not go to sleep on your stomach. No. Lying on the stomach is lying on the stomach. You're flat out on your stomach.
What's the proper position if you're making salat, you're already making the sunnah, and the iqamah is called, and you're lining up?
If the iqamah is called whilst you're doing sunnah, break your sunnah and join the fard. Yep. No taslim, because taslim is only when you're completing salah. Your salah is incomplete. You'll make it up. No, not really. I mean, I know scholars have taken the position, that if you're already halfway through or you're past the first ruku or they've made different conditions, then better just hurry up and finish it and then join. And I used to hold that opinion also. But then I saw the hadiths and I read about the practice of the Sahaba, which indicated that when that iqamah is made, just break it and join the prayer. Finish. Because it's sunnah. It's voluntary prayer. You can always do it after. So why, when you have a clear instruction where the Prophet ﷺ said, if the iqamah is given, no prayer is accepted except the compulsory prayer. That's clear. So we give it, we leave it. Okay, last question, we're gone. If you're aware of a ruling, should you tell it to people before confirming for yourself that it is the correct ruling? Yeah, you should confirm first. Shouldn't tell it to people. If you know it's something which is different from what everybody else is doing, then you better find out the evidence for it, so you don't end up and tell people, no, you shouldn't do that. Why? Oh, I heard. You heard, please. Please. No, otherwise we have confusion here. If we have a hadith, we have Quran, we have practice of the Sahaba, if we're going to tell people things, we need to bring that along with it. Give them the evidence. Right? Inshallah. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. I hope that you all found the examination easy. The nature of multiple choice examinations is that they tend to be a little tricky, Otherwise they end up being Mickey Mouse exams. So there had to be some twists here and there, but inshallah you recall the material and were able to answer it easily enough, inshallah. The passing grade would be 60%. And inshallah, the papers are being marked now. Maybe some of you will be able to find out what your marks were, but otherwise the marks will be sent to you along with the certificates. Okay, we have about half an hour, or about 3/4 of an hour to do our final session of questions and answers, Q&As. But just for the sake of everybody else, if you have a digestive condition such as colitis, when you pray and you have gas, meaning that you're passing gas on a constant basis, and it's something which has been diagnosed medically, what does a person do in such cases? Of course, what they do is they make wudu, and they go ahead and pray. Even though they may pass gas during the prayer, they just ignore it. But for each prayer, you would make wudu again. Each time you have to pray, you'd make wudu. And it would be treated the same as a person who has, for example, a urinary problem where they have urine dripping, it doesn't stop, that they just wear some kind of diaper-like thing and they just make their wudu and go ahead and pray. Or like women who have continual bleeding, which they identify in Islamic terminologies as istihada, then the woman makes wudu for each of the prayers. She stops praying during the period which was equivalent to the period of menses that she normally had, and then what comes after that normal 7-5 days, she considers it to be non-menstrual, and she continues to pray. She would make her ghusl coming out of that state of impurity due to menses, and then she would pray, making wudu for each of the prayers. What is your position on economic migration or immigration? To immigrate from the land of Muslims to the land of non-Muslims for economic reasons is haram. To go temporarily for business, you go and you sell and you trade, etc., and you're involved in dawah in the process, or you go for a certain amount of education or for medical treatment, things like this is permissible. But just to go because life is better there, yarhamkullah, which is the common situation for many, unfortunately, many Muslims in the West today. They emigrated because they wanted to get a piece of that American pie, or the British pudding, or whatever. This really was a haram hijrah, and they are reaping today the results of that mistake. They're suffering, communities in these areas. Of course, for those of us who are born in these lands from parents who emigrated here for the wrong reasons, then we have to look into our situation. If we're able to work for the sake of Islam and Islamic community and these kind of things whilst we're here, then alhamdulillah, one may do so and continue the struggle. But if one finds that one cannot practice Islam properly here, your Islam is threatened, you are weakened by the environment and all these other kinds of things, then it is obligatory to emigrate, to make hijrah to a land where you are better able to practice Islam. It may be within the country that you are, it may be within a city or within a state, or from one state to another state, or from one country to another country. The hijrah itself could come in a number of different formats, and one makes that decision and does the hijrah for the sake of Allah. And if one does so, and again some people question, well, if you make the hijrah and then you find a place that is better than the place that you went to, are you allowed to make another hijrah? Yes. It doesn't mean because you have made your first hijrah that's it, you're fixed, that you made your hijrah, you have to stay and stick it out. And no. Or some people were asking, I know, they went and made hijrah to some countries in the Muslim world, and then they found it very difficult. And they found things they didn't expect, and they found it was really not a good situation. So they had to come back to America, and people were telling them, you made hijrah and came back, and this is haram, you can't do this. Well, no, of course. If you go and you find that you're not able to do what you set out for, then of course you go back, regroup, work a bit more, get some more money, and give another try. Because it's not like the days of the early Muslim state, which spread across much of Africa, Asia, and Middle East, where a Muslim could move freely. You go to a place and you stay there. People came into Mecca for Hajj and they just lived there, they never went back. It's not like that. If life is not comfortable in the place you are, you don't have the right to stay there and live there, because new rules have been put in place where you're not a citizen, quote unquote a citizen, then you don't have certain rights. Though it is not in keeping with Islamic teachings, because of course every Muslim should have the right to live anywhere Muslims control the lands. Is a woman's wudu valid when she is wearing nail polish? No, it is not. If she made wudu whilst wearing nail polish, because the nail polish covers the nail and stops water from reaching the nail, therefore that invalidates her wudu. If she did used henna, because some people will put henna just on the fingernails also, or some people say, well, what about the woman who uses henna in her hair? Doesn't this also coat the hair? No, because henna doesn't coat, it actually is absorbed into the skin on the surface. It goes right into the surface. It doesn't sit as a layer on top of the surface of the skin or the nail or the hair. So, and in any case, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that was permitted. What is the meaning of the term ijtihad? I heard that ijtihad was stopped when the Mongols attacked Baghdad. What is the truth behind this? Actually, I discussed this at length in my book, The Evolution of the Schools of Islamic Law, The Evolution of Fiqh. That after the sacking of Baghdad, the scholars of the time who were heavily into madhab fanaticism, where the schools of Islamic law had become like separate religions. They wouldn't pray, people from the different schools wouldn't pray behind each other. And the judges had ruled that it was not permissible for a person to transfer from one madhab to another. The door of ijtihad was shut at that period. But there were scholars who rejected that closure and continued to practice ijtihad and refused to accept these artificial rulings prohibiting people from switching from one school to another. People like Ibn Taymiyyah and Ash-Shawkani in Yemen, Ibn Taymiyyah in Iraq, Shawkani in Yemen, Shah Waliullah in India, and others. They rejected this and continued to study and to teach beyond the confines and to make rulings beyond the confines of the madhab. Nowadays, most modern scholars recognize or accept that ijtihad can be done now, and the Mujamma al-Fiqhi, which is what they call it, legal academy, we would call it maybe, which is held in Mecca as one of the activities of the Rabita. They bring scholars from different parts of the Muslim world, from the different schools of Islamic law. They have regular meetings in Mecca, and they discuss and research modern issues of facing Muslim communities, of finance, etc., etc., and they look at the various issues as a group of scholars, and they make rulings, sometimes more than one ruling, on how to deal with these issues across the lines of madhab. Can you do wudu while taking a shower? Yes, you can. The ghusl, from janaba, as was the practice of the Prophet ﷺ, was to make wudu after washing one's privates, to make wudu and then to put water completely over the whole body. So it's a combination of wudu and ghusl. When two authentic hadiths conflict, what should one's position on this be? Well, the basic position is that we should try to blend the two hadiths together, work with both of them together by interpreting one as being general and the other one as being specific. Right? Where you have two authentic hadiths which conflict or appear to conflict. This is, of course, after determining that the two are in fact authentic. For example, one hadith says, whenever you come in the masjid, you should make 2 rak'ah before sitting down. Another hadith says, one should not pray after Fajr Salah until the rising of the sun. In the middle of the day, after Salatul Asr until the setting of the sun. So now if you come into the masjid after Salatul Fajr, right? You've prayed Fajr, you went home and you came back in the masjid, for example, you decided you want to read some Quran. The rule is that you're supposed to make 2 rak'ah, but Prophet ﷺ had also said you shouldn't pray until the rising of the sun. Also, he prohibited praying while the sun is rising, while the sun is setting. There's 5 times actually that salah was prohibited. In this circumstance, you would go ahead and pray those 2 before sitting. This is how those 2 hadiths are brought together, in that the one which says that you shouldn't pray in those times, this is for prayer which has not been specified. There's no instruction or recommendation for that particular prayer. It's just what they called voluntary prayer which has not been specifically specified. You just feel like making 2 rak'ah. Or you want to do dua al-istikhara, for example. So you want to make 2 rak'ah and then make this. No. These times, you would not make any other prayers. But if you're coming in the masjid, you should make the 2 before sitting. There's a requirement here now. And we know this, that this is the case because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ on one occasion, after they had finished Salatul Fajr, a companion stood up to pray. So he asked him, what are you praying? So he explained to him that this was the 2 units of prayer of the Sunnah of Fajr which he had missed. So he remained silent and didn't object. His silence meant his consent. Also, we know that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ reported that on one occasion, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, after praying Salatul Asr, came into the home and he started to pray 2 rakat. And they asked him, what is this, O Messenger of Allah? You told us after Asr we're not supposed to pray anything. He said, well, these were the 2 sunnahs after Dhuhr, which I was unable to make because a delegation had come to see me and discussing with them, I didn't get the opportunity. So he has prayed in those times, and allowed prayer in those times where there was a specific instruction. Right? So qada, prayers of qada, whether you're making qada, which is make-up prayers of fard or of sunnah, prescribed sunnah, may be done in those times. But the time of the actual rising of the sun and the actual setting of the sun, and when the sun is in the middle of the sky, at this time one should not begin any prayers. Should not begin any prayers, because those represent the 3 times when it is absolutely forbidden. And the companions said that there were these 3 times that the Prophet ﷺ forbade prayer, and forbade us even from burying our dead. So that added another level to that prohibition. Because of course burying the dead, somebody is dead, you finish the prayer, you should bury them. You shouldn't delay their burial. Prophet ﷺ stressed, hasten to complete the burial. So the fact that he restricted them from burying at that time, it meant absolutely one should not begin any prayer at that time. Can you shake a man's hand if you're a man? If not, what is the best way to avoid it without offending the person? Well, I take it you're a woman asking. You shouldn't do so, and you should try to give, either by what we call body language, you can give some kind of sign. You have your hands behind your back when you meet the people. This is a kind of like signal to people. You keep your hands. Their hands are coming out. You see it. Your hand is behind your back. There's no reaction happening. Sometimes that's enough for people to pick up you're not shaking hands, right? Or you're coming into a situation where people are going to be reaching out. So you get your hands busy with things. You're in school. You fill your hands with books. You walk around with your books. Or you just explain to them that, in my religion, we're not allowed to shake hands with males who are not our family members. That's what it is. And then if they want to know why, because sometimes this becomes a point for da'wah, they will say, yeah, why? And then you can use it to explain something about hijab and etc. At what age or time in her life should a Muslim girl begin to wear a full Muslim woman dress code including hijab? At the time of puberty it becomes compulsory. But parents should really start the children doing it from the earliest times. From the time they're 5, 4. Get them used to it from then. Because if unfortunately you find a lot of Muslims, they're saying, oh, they're just little kids. So they allow them to wear very small things, exposing their legs and exposing their little bodies and stuff. And then they grow up with that. And then when puberty comes, all of a sudden you say, okay, now you got to cover all up. Of course they're going to react. You're going to have the toughest time to get them to do it. Better to let them begin to do it. And those little kids, if one maintains proper hijab, you will find the little girls wanting to be like mother. I know it. My little daughter, from the time she was 3, she was wearing abaya. Jilbab. Whenever she went out, she'd have her whole khimar, jilbab and everything. She asked. And first my wife and I were discussing, should we, she's still small, and I said, if she wants, if she's asking, let her do it. Why not? And it's good. And she feels proud about it, and people, of course, whenever people say, they say, Mashallah, and this gives her further encouragement, to want to do it. So it's better to start them as young as, they willingly accept it when they're, of course we don't have to pressurize them, so it doesn't mean they have to do it every time, but to get them in the habit from the time they're quite young, this is the best thing. Is the following statement true or false? Oh, I'm getting an examination here now. When a girl is in the presence of her father or brother, her real brother, she must cover her hair. If this is true, then why is it so? It is not true. At what age does Salah become obligatory for children? At the age of puberty. Should a Muslim participate in national voting in a non-Muslim country? Muslims should participate in voting in the political process where their votes can prevent, or we say, the greater of the two evils. You have two people who are running for positions in the government, governmental positions, a mayor, a councilman, or whatever. They're running for these positions. You know, one of them hates Muslims, and he's gonna come at you, the Muslim community, and create all kinds of problems. Then there's another guy, he's sympathetic, you know. You can communicate with him, he does hear, you know, he's not a hardliner. Then, for you to say, well, Muslims, we don't vote, I'm not gonna vote. No. You should use your vote and support the person who is the lesser of the two evils, to prevent that other person from coming in and creating havoc in your community and harming you. So using the vote in this way is permissible Islamically. Or if one runs for some position as an independent, right? There's some slot open where it's possible, due to the numbers of Muslims in that given area, you could get your man in that slot, and he can do things for the Muslim community and on their behalf, as well as, you know, being just, he will do what's right for the non-Muslim community also. That's legitimate. But to join one of the parties, so you're going to be a Democrat, you know, or a Republican, you cannot do this. Because in joining these parties, you have to adhere to the manifesto of that party. And these parties all have open commitments to homosexuals and homosexuality, to defend homosexuality and so on and so. And it means you're signing in on that, you know, and other things, abortion and a variety of other things. You find yourself, you know, becoming a member of a party which calls to this, and you're expected to toe the party line. So it's not acceptable for a Muslim to join any of the existing Western parties, but in circumstances where it's possible to run as an independent, get in a position and help the Muslim community, in such circumstances it may be permissible. What is the ruling on television? Well, the ruling on television is that it's 95% evil and maybe there's a 5% good. And remember what we said about universal welfare and how Islamic law functions, that when you find that the evil is preponderant, then it's better to remove it altogether. To say you're going to keep it for that 5%, you're just asking for it. You know? You're leaving the door open, you're leaving yourself open to harm. So, unless you know, for example, for the sake of the family, whatever, you watch Islamic videotapes or whatever, so you keep one television, which is a television and video, which you keep locked away. You only take it out when you have to watch these Islamic things, otherwise it's locked away. The kids don't have the idea that, you know, we do have this one television, and when mom and dad aren't in the house, they can get down and watch it. No. You don't want to leave that door open. You should have strict control over it. Because even the cartoons, you know, people say, well, it's just cartoons. Let them just watch cartoons. The cartoons, studies have been done of the cartoons. The amount of violence that is there in the cartoons. They've given statistical information showing that there is more violence in these cartoons than in the average, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, you know. known for its violence. That these cartoons are much more violent, more violence per minute or per 60 seconds or per half a second, you know. So there is evil in them. Furthermore, these cartoons, though we think that, okay, it's just simple, it's just cartoon figures for children's entertainment and so on, so the point is that these people have an agenda. There is an agenda there. So even the cartoon movies like Ants, you know, or what's this one called, Shek or something, Shirk, or what's his name, Shirk? We call it Shirk, really, you know. Anyway, these cartoon movies, you know, dinosaurs, you know, it's just dinosaurs, but hey, there is a love story going on there. People are kissing and all this kind of stuff. Dinosaurs kissing, but hey, they're telling, their message is being sent here, you know. There's no marriage going on, right? The answer, you know, the point is that their values are being promoted and propagated, even in the cartoons. I mean, values which are promiscuous values. They promote promiscuity. So we have to be very careful when dealing with the media. Is Salatul Witr Sunnah or Wajib? It is Sunnah. I know in the Indo-Pakistani, they have the subcontinent, they have this phrase to the effect that Witr Wajib, they call it, or something like this, you know, and it's generally sort of looked at in that way, but it's not Wajib. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ was asked specifically, is Witr Wajib? And he said, no. Is it true that if we miss our Witr Salah at night and we make it up in the morning, we should make the number of rakahs even and not odd? Can you give a reference to this if it's true? Well, that's new to me. If you miss Witr, as far as I know, you're doing your Witr as 3 rakah, you do 3 after Fajr. Under what conditions would it be permissible for a wali of a lady to tell her to divorce her husband? She's unhappy in her marriage. Well, if she's unhappy in her marriage and she wants to get out of that marriage, he can advise her to divorce her husband. The circumstance where she is not unhappy, and this is a problem which Muslims, due to their commitment to parents, Muslims from the Middle East, from the Indo-Pakistani subcontinent, where they have this strong commitment to parents. I've cases come to me where, you know, brother says, listen, my father says I should divorce my wife. My mother says I should divorce my wife. She and my wife got into an argument, and my mother told me I have to divorce her. What should you tell such a person? You tell them no, they shouldn't. But of course there is a case in Islamic history where Umar ibn al-Khattab told his son, divorce your wife. And the son came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and asked him, you know, my father said I should divorce my wife. And the Prophet ﷺ said, divorce her. So they say, here is the evidence. But here is a question. There's a big question here. Can we take that as evidence for any parent to now go tell their child, divorce your husband, divorce your wife? Look at the circumstance here. See, somebody had asked me before too that, you know, where the Prophet ﷺ gave rulings for different circumstances in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, can we apply these things across the board? In general, yes. In general, when the Prophet ﷺ said, this is so, that is so, he approved this, so, this can be taken as a general permission for anybody to do it. Right? But there are certain times where the way in which this ruling has come, it is obvious if one reflects on it that this is unique to that circumstance. Abdullah ibn Umar, his father, as we said, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he told his son to divorce his wife. Now, if it was an obligation on him to do so, he would not have gone to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First point. He would have just obeyed. Because Abdullah ibn Umar was a person who was very strict on the Sunnah. You know, you see all the narrations where, you know, companions are coming down on people for following opinions and not following the Sunnah. Abdullah ibn Umar is right up there with those very strong narrations. So the fact that he took it back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant it was not an obligation. It was known not to be an obligation to obey one's parents in this regard. However, when he took it to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, follow your father's decision and divorce your wife. He is confirming that there is something wrong with that wife. Based on revelation from Allah to him, he is advising him to take his father's advice. His father Omar, who had very deep insight, he was known, Omar, known for his depth of insight. He saw in the daughter of his son evil. He saw evil, he saw harm there, and he told his son to divorce the daughter. And with the confirmation of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did it. Now, our times, if a parent tells a son or daughter to divorce their husband or wife, does she obey or he obey? No. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not here to confirm it, that it's the right decision. You know, is mother or father like Umar ibn al-Khattab? No. So the condition for that decision, the conditions for that decision don't exist now, so we can't apply it. And it's important because a lot of Arab brothers I know run into this problem, and they end up divorcing their wives simply because the parents told them they disliked something happened in the family, they disliked the wife, and they said divorce her, and they feel obliged to go and divorce their wives. This is wrong. Do you not have to obey your parents unless they ask you to do something haram? Yes. And to ask you to divorce your wife over their personal dislike is haram. That's why you don't obey them. Is Belize still open for hijrah? And how can I contact the community in that country? Belize is still open, as far as I know. And whoever had asked that question after the lecture or after this Q&A, I can give you the contact numbers for some of the brothers and sisters there in Belize. Is it permissible to make dua at the gravesite after the burial? Yes, it was the sunnah. Prophet ﷺ did so. What is the ruling on women who accompany the dead to the cemetery? Can they go on the ground? Well, the general recommendation is that women should not accompany the funeral procession. That's the general recommendation. However, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ said that they still used to do so. Some of them on occasion still used to do so. So we know that it is disliked and not prohibited absolutely. So in such a case, if one did accompany them right into the graveyard, it is permissible. If you did not start praying until a few years after you should have started, age 10, can you do anything to make up for it? No, there's no need to make up for that. The prayer at the age of 10, where the Prophet ﷺ said, teach your children salah at the age of 7, that means teach them how to pray. Not necessarily meaning that you must now establish 5 times daily prayer for them. Little kid, 7 years old, you're trying to get him up in the morning for Fajr, you know. Some kids, alhamdulillah, they get up when they can do it. Other kids, it's just so hard. So, do you have to? No, at this point you don't. If they pray the Dhuhr and the others when they're awake with you, that's enough. You know, and as they get more mature and more able in that, then you get them up for Fajr also. So when they reach 10, spank them for it at 10. And this is if the kids have not learned how to pray, they're still, you know, messing around, whatever, you know. At this point here, you can spank them to make sure they learn the prayers. And this again is not an obligation of 5 times daily prayer. Although one should try to have that established then. It's good if you can. But still, the actual establishment of 5 times daily prayer is at puberty. But learning the prayer, knowing when the times are, knowing how many rak'at. Learning the prayer means not just knowing what to do in a prayer, but knowing that there's 2 for Fajr, you know, 4 for Dhuhr, and so on, so that they know how many, what to do when you come late, how to make up. And you know, by the age of 10, they should know these things. If one enters the masjid and the jama'ah is in session, should one pray the 2 rak'at for the masjid or sit and begin listening to the service? Or Jum'ah, Salatul Jum'ah. If one comes into the masjid while Salatul Jum'ah is going on, you make, the Imam is giving the khutbah, you make your 2 rak'ah before sitting down. On one occasion, the Prophet ﷺ was giving the khutbah. A man came in the masjid and sat down in his sight. And he stopped his khutbah and asked the man, did you pray your 2 rak'at? And the man said, no. He said, get up and pray them. Okay? This is the evidence that it is a requirement, even whilst the khutbah is going on. Now, some people, you have some schools of thought, where they took the position that you shouldn't, you should just sit down. So they said, well, the reason why the Prophet ﷺ told this man to get up and to do this was because actually he was poor. He was a poor man. You know, his clothes were a bit raggedy or whatever. And the Prophet ﷺ wanted the rest of the companions to see him, see his state, so that they would donate, give some charity to him. Sounds nice, but there is no evidence for it. This is a made-up story, an explanation to escape the realities of the Sunnah and stick on to the decision of the madhab. Go ahead. To make the Sunnah prayers, what is the ruling on it? If one prays the Fard Rakat and doesn't do Sunnah, they have done the requirement of Islam. There is absolutely no sin. As the man who Prophet ﷺ had come to him and asked him, what is the requirements of Islam on me? And the Prophet ﷺ told him that, and he said, I will not do any less, nor will I do any more. And he said he will go to paradise if he is truthful. Without any legitimate reason, if one only does the fard, that is sufficient. That is the requirement of Islam, and that's why it's called fard. Pardon? No, without witr. The person who does his 5 times daily prayer, fard, without doing anything of the sunnah around it, whether witr, whether the two, before sitting in the masjid, whether the two before the prayers and the two after. He doesn't do any of those. All he does or she does is the 5 times daily prayer. Exactly. That is a fulfillment of the requirement of salah in Islam. Will not be questioned. I just told you about the man. This man, with very famous hadith, it's in Sahih Muslim, where the man said, that's all I'm going to do. When the Prophet ﷺ started, he asked, what is required of me in salah? He said, these 5 prayers. And he said, what the Prophet ﷺ went on to say, and if you wish, you can also do. The man said, okay, enough. Thank you. Right? He says, I will do just that. I won't do any less, nor will I do any more. And he said, if he is truthful, he's going to paradise. Do we need more evidence than that? There is no authentic evidence to prohibit women from reading the Quran in a state of menses, as there is really no authentic evidence to prohibit a menstruating woman from coming into the masjid. But if you try to say that amongst the average Muslims today, they would think that you have lost it, you've gone astray. You are now a heretical Wahhabi maniac, right? But I'm just telling you, in terms of the evidence is not there. It is in fact permissible for a woman to touch the Quran in menses and to enter the masjid. Yeah, I'm saying that a menstruating woman can come and sit in the masjid. The evidence which is used for the women not being in the masjid is a hadith concerning Eid, where the Prophet ﷺ said, have everybody go to the Eid, even your menstruating women, but let them stay away from the prayer area. That is the one which is used for evidence that the woman cannot sit in the masjid in state of menses. But that is not evidence. The fact that they're asked to stay back to allow the women who are not in their menses to pray and establish their lines, that's all it is. Don't break up the lines, better to stay back and allow those who are praying to occupy those spaces. But to say you can't go in the masjid, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ sent Aisha, it's in Bukhari, sent her into the masjid to get his rug. And he didn't tell her, go in and get back out quickly. No. Now, there is hadith about a person who is in a state of janaba. And they try to apply that hadith to the woman in her menses. Because it is true, a person in a state of janaba should not go and sit in the masjid. Janaba. You know, and the only exception is what Allah refers to as abir sabil, the person you're just passing through. But to go sit in the masjid, you're in a state of janaba, male or female, not allowed. That's true. But for the menstruating woman, there is no evidence. And to compare the person who is in janaba with the menstruating woman, because at the time of purification both of them take ghusl, that is not a proper analogical comparison. To compare them is comparing apples and oranges. The fact that a woman takes ghusl to come out of menses is not the same as a person taking ghusl to come out of janaba. You can take ghusl and come out of janaba anytime. The woman who's in her menses, can she just say, okay, I'm going to get out of janaba menses, so I'll just make my ghusl? No. She has to sit out that period and then make her ghusl to end it. Okay, the verse commonly used to say that a person who is not in a state of wudu or purity should not touch the Quran. لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. This verse does not refer neither to the Mus'haf that we are talking about, nor to human beings. If you read the verse in its context, it is talking about the angels. Mutahhar is not a quality of human beings. That is, those who have been purified, who do not become impure. That is not human beings. We are mutatahhir. We can purify ourselves, and we can become defiled. The angels cannot become defiled. They are fixed pure. And the book which is talking about in that verse, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون, none can touch it except the pure, is the Quran in the Lawh al-Mahfuz. And you read any classical tafsir, Ibn Kathir, anybody else, it is pointed out, though people still continue to bring this back, it has been unanimous amongst the scholars of tafsir that it is not relevant to